Hi, this is Chris here from Woodman Spirit Channel. It's been on my mind for a while just to do a brief video on bushcraft or woodcraft knives. I'm not particularly keen to make a whole series of reviews on knives, and I know there's hundreds if not thousands on YouTube now, but I think I would like to address some of the the confusion or controversy around knives that is unfortunately is perpetuated on YouTube. So I have a selection of knives here, and when I say a selection, I probably have, I don't know, 50 or 60 knives I've accumulated over the years. Some are collector's items, so sometimes I've been guilty of spending money on things because they look pretty. But the fact of the matter is, if we're talking here about woodcraft or bushcraft, if you prefer. I mean, in the UK it's tend to be referred more as bushcraft, and I, like many other Brits, our passion has been rekindled by Ray Mears of bushcraft fame. But of course we must acknowledge people like Dave Canterbury and on his excellent website, and I know Dave is more passionate about the term woodcraft, which relates more to the teaching of early American woodcraft skills. People like Krebs and the philosophy of Henry David Thoreau and people like that. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about the philosophy of woodcraft or bushcraft, but what I am here to do today is to address the issue of what I call knife snobbery. There's so many companies now and so many individuals make stunningly beautiful bushcraft survival oriented knives, and there's a whole realm of crazy making debate around what's the best handle material, what's the best blade material, why one is superior to another, and why one is you shouldn't waste your money on it. But I think a lot of this conversation has become ridiculous, and I just want to show you a small selection of knives I've got and just kind of say to you what they're capable of, and I'll tell you how much they cost as well. Well, let's start with a lot of people now want to buy a good bushcraft knife. They're going to be spending probably $200 or $250 or maybe more. Maybe like with the I know with the Ray Mears Woodlaw knife, I think that's probably in the realms of, I don't know, $500 or more, or maybe even more than that, because it's a British product. But here I have probably the most expensive bushcraft knife I have, and I'd been looking at bushcraft knives for a long time. I wanted something around 4 inches, because I really don't think anything over 4 inches makes the most useful of bushcraft knives. The reason I'm saying that is that when you're doing fine work with a knife, the amount of leverage you have to put on a knife like a bushcraft knife, a lot of your tasks are done with maybe the first inch or two on the blade down here, because that's where you get most of the driving power for things like splitting kindling or making feather sticks, or cutting notches into wood. Now, once you get more or less to the end of the blade, most people will have noticed that when you're putting pressure down, when you're putting pressure down to make a cut, if you're using the end of the blade, it's virtually impossible because of the physics of leverage. So obviously, the closer to your hand it is, the better, and obviously you need to have a blade that's very sharp close up. So yeah, coming back to the whole thing around what I unfortunately like to call knife snobbery, is this is not the most expensive knife in the world. I think I paid somewhere in the region, trying to convert it from British pounds into dollars, probably about $265 for this. It's a Finnish made knife. It's a very good knife. I think it's one of the spring steels. It's a convex Scandi-ish kind of grind. Yeah, and I like blades that have a bit of a point on the end. I'm not too keen with totally straight back blades, although I do have some. I do like knives that have a fair size, fair length of handle, because, you know, whereas I'm not a huge individual, I've got quite wide hands, and I want a handle that will really fit well into my hands, particularly as I get older, and, you know, rheumatism is always an issue. But at least with this kind of handle I can work quite a long time, and before I reach the discomfort of doing woodcraft. So yeah, it comes in a very nice sheath, with a wooden liner in it. This particular knife is the model is it's called a Bush Prowler, I believe, and it's made by a guy called Ilkka Seikku in Finland. So yeah, and at the time I was really interested in the idea of thick knives, and this is a full 1/4 inch spine on this. But what I would say, and this is an extremely tough knife, and again $265 or thereabout. It's I don't really believe that the really thick blades are the best for bushcraft. For one thing, they weigh more, and for another thing, if you're doing finer tasks, a penetration with a finer blade is generally better. The convex grind on this cuts very well, and convex cuts better than straight Scandi. It parts the fibres better, but it has to be ground properly. So that's an expensive knife. But what I'm saying here is you don't have to pay expensive. I'm going to show you the exact contrast here. Now this knife here, I've had this knife probably 30 years or more. Would like to guess how much this cost me? Okay. What, 20, 30, 40 dollars maybe? Nope, it didn't cost me anything. When I lived in England, I was having a ramble one day by an old farm, and I found this rusted up old butcher knife, which is what this is, just laid on the middle of the road, looking very sorry for itself. So I picked it up, took it home, and I was kind of getting into the old stuff about bushcraft back then. So it had more of a bull-nosed blade on it, one of those blades that comes up here a bit like that. So I cut it back to a bushcraft size. I think it's about 4 inches, this. I think it's probably mid-19th century, so it's quite an old knife. It's not expensive, but it's stood the test of time. It's 4 steel pins and brass and steel pin in the middle, probably rosewood handles. Flat ground blade with a very slight convex on the edge, razor sharp. Very, if you can quite see that, but you can make hair thickness feathers on here. So, if you're talking about an expensive knife being one that will cut well, this didn't cost anything, and this cuts well. So this has had a lot of use, and I'd still be perfectly happy to take this out as much as I would a $265 or a $500 knife. It will do the job. If I lose it, there's emotional story to this knife, but I wouldn't be crying about losing something of great value. Just made up an old, this sheath made up out of some old saddlery leather, and that didn't cost me anything. So that's showing you that you don't have to spend a lot for a knife that is good, will do the job, and will sustain for years. Similar, more well-known variety of knife is the old hickory ones here. Again, this was a bull nose. I've just recently got this and ground the back off. In time I may cut these scales off and put some fatter ones on, but by no means is this a bad knife to get started in the hobby of woodcraft or bushcraft with. It's pretty good carbon steel. It's one of the Shapley Forge, which I think is the earlier hickory knives, and so good carbon steel. Does rust, so what? Clean it. That's what you're supposed to do with knives. If you leave them in water or dirt, they're going to rust, and that's the end of the story. But it will cut well. It will cut feathers. It's not as, I haven't got it as sharp as this knife though. But then you've got a third option, and the third option is make your own. I'm just in the process of finishing this knife off. Now, I'm really pleased with this, because the thing with making your own Bushcraft Woodcraft knife is that if you know what you're doing, you make something that exactly suits your needs, and over years you find your little likes and dislikes, but this pretty much encapsulates everything that I want to see in a Bushcraft knife. Now, I think this is Sleipner steel, which is a carbon steel with a high level of chromium in. I believe it's somewhere over 60 Rockwell, so it's darned hard steel. But I tested it and it does throw good sparks. So initially I started by making a Scandi grind on here, and then once I'd achieved that, rounding it off with emery paper and a belt sander, keeping it cool of course, to make almost a convex profile. And particularly if you notice at the tip, it's very round cheeks on the tip, cuts like a razor. Again, you need some practice to sharpen knives well, but of course that's part of the fun of bushcraft. The handles, for those of you who are interested, are English yew, soaked in pine tar and a mixture of pine tar, linseed oil and turpentine, and soaked in with the use of a wood stove over several days. And the rivets are copper Corby rivets. So, you know, in terms of money, I put about $100 into this knife, but I think it's as good a quality as a lot of knives of $250 or more. With the added bonus, and this is the big thing, it's exactly what I'm looking for. No doubt a year or two down the road I may find that there's something that could be better on this, and that'll be plan C. But yep, then this I think is about, this is a little bit longer, but it's about 4 1/4 or almost 4 1/2. But square spine, thrust backs like a demon. So that's what you get maybe for $100 investment and some blacksmithing and knife making skills. I'm not a professional knife maker, but I can turn a rough blade out. Now, and here's another knife that has had absolutely no shortage of coverage on YouTube, and people tend to describe it as a knife with a love-hate relationship. Either people love it or they hate it. Well, I love it, and I'll tell you why. So there you go. For those of you who haven't recognised it yet, this is the Condor Bush Law. Do I need another knife? No, but I wanted to buy this, and I got it for $50 Canadian, shipped to my house. It encapsulates a lot of the current design benefits of a bushcraft knife. It's not too heavy. It's around about 1/8 of an inch thick. I'm not going to go into a lot of technical detail about this knife. All I can say is when I got it, I stropped it on a piece of thick leather with some metal polish on it, about 5 strokes each side, and it would cut as good as pretty much any other knife I've got. Certainly good enough to go straight out there and do some good bushcraft work. Nothing wrong with this knife. You know, it's, people say, oh well, it's a $50 knife and it'll fail, and people make them fail just so they can prove the point. But what I'm saying is, you know, really the structure of that is not a million miles from this. And this is probably, I don't know, 40 or 50 years old. And this, similar structure again, wooden scale, similar size blade, probably 150 years old. So, you know, if you want to bust a knife, you can bust one. But of course, you know, if you think it's a little bit rough around the edges, which, you know, I don't think it's too bad, but if you want to upgrade it, there's things you can do and things I'm doing. One is I've just rounded off some of the corners on the wood here, because sometimes when you're driving a knife into wood, you can catch a sharp edge and make a little split happen. I've rubbed the handle down with steel wool, and I've begun to impregnate it again with linseed oil, pine tar and turpentine mixture. There's a nice little lanyard hole there for people who like them. I'm not too fussed. I tend to look after my knives, so I don't think I've ever lost one out of the many knives I have. Pretty decent sheath. But you notice I've also made an improvement to this sheath. Again, didn't cost me anything. piece of scrap leather, got a couple of copper rivets and an old key ring, and I've just made myself a perfect little dangler there, right? I've also put inside the sheath a little sliver of leather. I don't know if you can quite see it. And I like that because knife sheaths, particularly when you've oiled them up, tend to stretch, or if they get wet they stretch. So as yet I've not impregnated this sheath in anything, but I have some stuff in the house that I can do it with. But it does make it a bit tight to start with. But that's good, because in 2 or 3 weeks of usage that'll be loose. The other thing I'm going to do with this, and you know, it's not that not particularly well established Scandi style edge on there. I'm going to take it back maybe double the amount of bevel on there. I'm going to slightly convex it, and I'm going to put a very fine micro convex edge on the blade, because you know, people say that this 1075 steel is crap compared with 1095. Well, I'll tell you something, 1075 has some benefits over 1095. It's the 1075 is slightly less liable to chip than the 1095. It has 20% less carbon in it, I believe. That's why the one's called 1075 as opposed to 1095. Yeah, so you know, there's a little bit of a payoff. It's slightly, I mean, it's fairly hard edge. I've not used it enough to make an informed commentary on how it compares with other steels, but it's more than adequate. 1075 is not garbage. It's perfectly respectable steel. Not high end, not terribly expensive, but there again, this is you know, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck with this knife. So I'm going to impregnate this sheath with a mixture of pine tar, beeswax and turpentine, and I'm going to soak the inside and the out, because nothing's worse than water getting in a sheath and rotting your blade from inside. So if I impregnate it and bake the wax into the leather with a hairdryer, and when the wife's out, I'm sure it'll be durable and totally waterproof. So that's giving you several options here. A free knife that works as good as any, $20 off eBay, $100 and a few knife making skills and some fun in learning, $265 or $50 off Amazon. So yep, so if you want to go out there and do Woodcraft, Bushcraft, don't be ashamed to take this or this. It doesn't matter what folks say to you. You know, you can have fun and do as much work as they can with their knives. Of course, I'm not covering here things like Luku's. You know, this one I made here, and this one is, I think it's about 100-year-old antique. I mean, these are more for chopping brush or for butchering reindeer or whatever, but I'll make another video about these someday. But this is a very shallow Scandi on here, and I've also made another one here. You know, for those who like to batten, I would suggest you probably get something like this, which is pretty much a 1/4mm spine, pure and Varsi blade. You'll not break this one in a hurry, and it's a root. The handle is made out of root, so it doesn't. It's not prone to splitting like regular wood. Anyway, not too much more to say today. Thanks for watching. Give me the thumbs up if you like the video. Unfortunately, I won't be making too many knife videos, but hopefully in the summer you'll see me using some of these knives. Yeah, subscribe, comments, always welcome. Thanks very much, and look forward to a wonderful spring outdoors when the snow eventually goes. Take care everyone. Bye now.